Hello and welcome back to Ganga Education. On this platform, you will find quality lectures relating to the field of law, competitive examination in legal domain, important legal facts and legal history, all explained in clear and structured manner.
And in today's video, we are going to discuss another important topic from the perspective of the judiciary examination for essay writing question, that is victim and witness protection.
In our justice system, some voices, they're just more vulnerable than others. So today, we're going to explore why protecting victims and witnesses, well, it isn't just about being compassionate. It's actually essential if we want justice to be served. So let's dive right into the world of the silent witness.
And, the philosopher Jeremy Bentham, he put it perfectly. He said, witnesses are the eyes and ears of justice. I mean, think about that. They are literally the senses of the legal system. They're the ones who saw what happened, they heard what was said. And honestly, their testimony, that's usually the main evidence that makes the whole system work and get to a just result.
Right. But that leads to a huge question, doesn't it? What happens when those eyes are forced to look away? When those ears are too afraid to listen? This is the real heart of the problem, especially when we talk about horrific crimes like human trafficking. See, the key witness is also the victim. They've gone through unimaginable trauma, and all that fear, that intimidation, the scarring, it can just silence them. And when that happens, it's like the justice system itself has been blinded and deafened.
Okay, so here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll look at the core problem. Then, we'll get into a powerful new approach for solving it. After that, the practical steps needed, the wall of fear that victims face, and finally, the global commitment to protecting these really vulnerable voices.
All right, let's start with the first part, the eyes and ears of justice. It's all about that fundamental role the victim plays. I mean, especially in human trafficking cases, the victim's own story, their testimony, that is the single most powerful piece of evidence you can have against a trafficker. They are, quite literally, the living proof that a crime even happened.
And this is where it gets really tricky. You've got this central conflict, right? The very person who holds the key to the whole case is also the person who's been most damaged by the crime. They're living with so much trauma and fear that a lot of times they just refuse to speak, or they might even change their story. The courts have a term for this, a hostile witness. And that single broken link in the chain, that's what lets perpetrators walk free.
So, how do we fix this? How do we mend that broken link? Well, the solution isn't just a small tweak. It needs a massive shift in how we think about things. And that brings us to something called a victim-centric approach.
Now, I know victim-centric approach might sound like a bit of jargon, but trust me, it's a revolutionary way of thinking. You see, traditionally, a victim might have just been seen as, well, a piece of evidence, a tool for the prosecution. This approach, it flips that completely on its head. It says, no, the primary focus has to be on the human being. Their safety, their rights, their well-being, that's what comes first, through the entire and, let's be honest, grueling legal process.
So what does that actually look like? Well, it's all built on a foundation of basic rights. It means that officials need to show empathy. It means the victim isn't just a passive player who's told what's happening. No, they have to be consulted, they have a right to know what's going on, and maybe most importantly, a right to be protected, both physically and psychologically. The whole goal is to build trust and, just minimize any more trauma.
Okay, so it's great to have all these principles, right? But principles are just ideas. To make them real, you need a concrete support system. And that's what brings us to the pillars of protection. These are the real, practical things you have to do to make this whole victim-centric idea actually work. And this really shows you what that support system looks like. It's a whole path, really. Step one is immediate safety, right? A proper place to live. But it absolutely cannot stop there. It has to include counseling and clear info about their legal rights. Then, medical and psychological help for the trauma. And finally, a real path forward, a chance to rebuild their life with education or job training. It's about so much more than just safety. It's about recovery and real empowerment.
And this point right here, this is the absolute core of it. A safe house is crucial, of course, but it's only the first step on a very long road. Real protection has to be holistic. Think about it. If you don't help a victim heal from the psychological trauma, the fear is always going to be there, and they're never, ever going to feel safe enough to stand up and testify. Physical and mental support, they just have to go hand in hand.
All right, now let's flip this around and look at the other side.
Even if you have all these great support systems, victims are still up against this massive wall of fear. So what exactly are the bricks that build this wall? What keeps them silent?
Well, there are 5 major concerns that come up again and again. First, and this one's pretty obvious, is just raw fear. Fear for their own safety, or maybe even worse, the safety of their family. Second, they worry about being treated like a criminal themselves for things they were forced to do. Then, if they're not a citizen, their immigration status is a huge, constant source of stress. There's also the fear of being shamed by their own community. And finally, the terrifying thought of having to be in the same room as their traffickers again.
So, as you can see, this isn't just a problem in one city or one country, it's a global issue. And because it's global, it needs a unified, global response. The good news is, the international community has recognized this and has actually set up some pretty clear standards for protecting victims and witnesses.
And we're talking about a landmark commitment here. The UN Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime. It has a part, Article 24, that specifically says nations have to provide effective protection for witnesses. And not just them, their families too. Protection from retaliation, from intimidation. This is huge. It basically makes witness protection a fundamental international human right.
In this legal framework, it's not just one rule, it's got layers. On one hand, you have Article 25 of the main convention, which talks broadly about assisting and protecting victims. But then, if you look at the specific trafficking protocol, Article 6 gets way more detailed. It talks about things like protecting a victim's privacy and identity, maybe even making the court proceedings confidential. When you put them all together, they create this really strong international shield.
And look, this isn't just some abstract idea floating around at the UN. For countries that have actually signed on, like India, these aren't just helpful suggestions. They are formal commitments. It means they've agreed to build and maintain systems that protect the rights and safety of victims and witnesses right here, at home.
So let's end where we started. If we really believe that witnesses are the eyes of justice, then we have to ask ourselves, how clearly can justice really see the truth if we don't have a system to protect those eyes? Without that robust, empathetic protection, our vision of justice, well, it's always going to be blurred, isn't it? Incomplete, and ultimately unfulfilled.
Thank you for watching this session. If you found this lecture useful, do like, share and subscribe to Ganga Education. Keep learning, keep growing and stay connected for more law lectures.